Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how Arsenal comfortably defeated Bournemouth to advance to the 5th round of the FA Cup. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on our road to 3K subscribers. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal in a 4-2-3-1, and we have Bournemouth also in somewhat of a 4-4-1-1. When you really do assess it, both sides look to press in similar manners. When we look at Bournemouth, what we ended up having there was Fraser, and we had Solanke stepping out to the center backs. We had Harry Wilson, and we had Lewis Cook stepping out to the fullbacks. And in the earlier stages, we did see Guendouzi drop off a bit deeper, and Sermon did step to him out of all players. But nonetheless, when they did look to close down, the midfield battle wasn't set with Sermon and Gosling looking to step to Xhaka and Guendouzi. That's how they looked to press from the front. And when they weren't pressing higher up the pitch, what we ended up seeing was Solanke and Fraser doing a very good job of blocking off the passing lanes into Guendouzi and Xhaka. We often saw Guendouzi stuck in that box in between the central midfielders and Fraser and Solanke, and we did see Xhaka vary his movement. We'll get to that in a bit. For the most part, Xhaka would shift out to a left center back role, but there were occasions in that first half where he did look a bit confused as to where he would get the ball, and he would push forward into a more advanced position between Harry Wilson and Sermon. But that's how Bournemouth looked to close down from the front, and we saw something similar from Arsenal. We saw Willock stepping to Ake, we saw Nketiah stepping into the path of Steve Cook, and Martinelli and Nicolas Pepe did a good job of closing down the Bournemouth fullbacks. Xhaka stepped into the path of Sermon. We had Guendouzi closing down Gosling, and with that being said, that's how Arsenal looked to press from the front as well. We did see a much more improved counter press from Arsenal, and they were first to all the second balls, and that was also essential to them retaining possession. But if both sides were looking to press in a similar manner because they did play nearly identical systems, then you had to question how Arsenal were comfortable winners here. And there were two factors to that. One being Xhaka's positioning, as he did shift into that left center back role. And when he shifts into that left center back role when Arsenal do have the ball, one, it makes it 3v2 out of the back. It also allows Saka to push forward higher up the pitch, and that pegs back Harry Wilson. Martinelli was operating in more of a narrow role, looking to drop off Smith, or he was shifting into that space in between Steve Cook and Smith. And when you look at the rest of the Arsenal players, Willock was somewhat of the free man based off the fact that Gosling and Sermon were looking to step into the path of Guendouzi. And Sermon in particular possibly could have picked up Willock there based off the fact that Xhaka wasn't dropping off into that position. But you have to question whether he possibly should have been stepping forward to Xhaka as well. So Willock's the spare man. You have Nicolas Pepe occupying that right touch line and looking to stick towards it against Simpson. And if Bellerin did look to step forward, it was in transition or through an underlapping run, but we didn't see much of that in that first half. So what ended up happening here is that you have Xhaka shifting into that left center back role to ensure that they're able to get 3v2 in those situations. And the difference between Arsenal and Bournemouth here was that we did see Willock move into various positions to pick up the ball, and that was essential. He was willing to vary his movement and shift into areas to find the ball in pockets of space, whereas Fraser didn't do that. He was often looking to try and link play with Solanke, and that never really worked out in their favor. And what Fraser should have done here was he should have looked to drop off into those pockets of space as well to pick up the ball in deeper positions, and then look to run at the Arsenal backline. And when we do look at Arsenal's best chances in that first half, or frankly throughout that game, it stems through Xhaka and it stems through Willock's various movement. So when we look at the first example, it's actually Arsenal's opener, and it took them only 5 minutes to snatch it. What we end up seeing there is Mustafi on the ball, and he ends up sliding the ball into the path of Pepe, dropping off of Simpson to receive the ball ahead of Lewis Cook. That was often a movement from Pepe. He wasn't looking to break him behind. He was often looking to receive the ball as he dropped off or when he was coming short. So he picks up that ball ahead of Lewis Cook, and he's able to spin away from Cook. And what should be noted here is that he's able to find Willock Willock by playing a splitting pass between Gosling and Simpson. So what ends up happening there is that he plays that pass into the path of Willock, and Willock's able to turn towards goal. We have Pepe continue his run, darting in between Ake and Simpson. We have Nketiah looking to dart in between the center backs, and that allows Willock to drive towards Steve Cook. And when he makes a dart into that space, he ends up sliding the ball across Cook into the path of Martinelli ahead of Smith. So you have Martinelli ahead of Smith at the edge of the box, and what we end up seeing there is Saka making an overlapping run beyond Harry Wilson into left half space to receive the ball from Martinelli, and from an awkward angle, he fires an unstoppable shot off the bar and in. Yes, you can say it was a moment of brilliance from Saka to score from that angle, but what we end up seeing there is Willock finding that pocket of space to receive the ball. We have the movement from the runners in Pepe and Nketiah and Martinelli, which is what you expect. But like I said, with Xhaka shifting into that left channel, it allows Saka to push forward, and that was one good example of him getting beyond Harry Wilson to pose as an attacking threat, and it proved decisive for Arsenal there. Shortly after that, we witnessed another legitimate goal-scoring opportunity that does involve Xhaka and Willock. What we end up seeing here is Xhaka shifting into that left center back role to receive that ball once again, and he steps towards the halfway line, not pressed by any Bournemouth player, and he tries to clip a long diagonal ball into the right channel. Simpson should do a good job of clearing his lines here, but he lets the ball go over his head and it falls into the path of Nicolas Pepe, who drops the ball off into the path of Bellerin with Lewis Cook stepping towards him. What we should note here is once again, Willock does play a key role. He ends up darting into that right half space, and Gosling does track him, but once again, when Bellerin pokes the ball into the path of Willock, like he did for the build-up to the goal, he's able to spin away from Gosling into that right half space, skip away from Ake, and he pokes an effort on goal that is safe for a corner kick. But once again, the difference between him and Fraser, his ability to vary his movement to get into good pockets of space to pose as a goal-scoring threat, whereas Fraser was playing a bit too high, trying to combine with Solanke, and they were unsuccessful in doing that. So when we look to Arsenal's second goal, it epitomizes Mikel Arteta's tactical plan to break down Bournemouth. What we end up seeing here is Xhaka initially getting the ball, and he's pressed by Harry Wilson. He slides it out to Socrates, who is closed down by Fraser, and then we see the ball shifted into the path of Mustafi, who is closed down by Solanke. Solanke tries to close down Mustafi, but Mustafi does a very good job of stepping ahead of the Bournemouth striker to push forward, and when he pushes forward, he ends up splitting Gosling and Sermon for Nketiah, who does drop off to drag out Steve Cook. When he drags out Steve Cook has to make a decision here. He should look to foul Nketiah if he knows that he's going to get turned, or he should try to hold him up and force him to play the ball back into the midfield. But what ends up happening here is that we should also focus on Willock, who was initially in between Simpson and Ake, and he dropped off ahead of the midfield bank to receive the layoff pass from Nketiah. So when Nketiah plays the layoff pass into the path of Willock, we end up seeing Nketiah shift out to the right-hand side to dart in between Simpson and Ake, and we also see Steve Cook look to recover his position. But Willock does locate the run of Saka breaking into that left channel free because Wilson did step out to Xhaka. And with Saka stepping into that left channel, it forces Smith to leave Martinelli, who was running across the Bournemouth right back, to step into the path of Saka. So Smith steps into the path of Saka. We have Martinelli darting into the box, which drags out Nathan Ake. And we have Nketiah making a darting run in between Simpson and Ake. Simpson now should be looking to get goal side of Nketiah with Lewis Cook tracking Pepe, but Simpson is worried about the run of Pepe breaking into the box, so he doesn't pick up Nketiah charging freely into the box. And with Steve Cook out of position, when Saka plays that low cross into the box, it bypasses Ake, Steve Cook, and Martinelli and falls to Nketiah, who is able to tap in his effort from point blank range to put Arsenal up. When you break down that chance, it's so simple. Steve Cook is pulled out of position. Xhaka's position in that left center back role does allow Saka to push forward. Martinelli was looking to get goal side of Smith as it was, and Willock varying his position to combine with Nketiah offsetted it all. But what we end up seeing there as well is with Xhaka making that movement, we had Arsenal bypass Bournemouth's disjointed pressing, and that allowed them to get their key players into the positions that Mikel Arteta looked to set out. Nonetheless, we did see Bournemouth shift to a 4-5-1 following Arsenal going up 2-0, and we ended up seeing Fraser shift out to the left-hand side and Lewis Cook adopt a left central midfield role. That kind of shifted the balance of the game because now Sermon would be looking to step into the path of Willock, and Arsenal wouldn't have that midfield superiority that they did in the opening 30 minutes of that game. Nonetheless, Arsenal were still able to bypass Bournemouth's midfield when they shifted to the 4-5-1, and when we look to an example shortly after the formation change, what we end up seeing here is that Xhaka does get the ball in that left center back role, and Wilson does step out once again to close down Xhaka, but Xhaka ends up playing the ball into the path of Saka, which pulls out Smith, and Martinelli this time shifts out into the left channel. That forces Lewis Cook to track that run, and when Lewis Cook tracks that run when Martinelli gets the ball, it allows Martinelli to get 1v1 with Lewis Cook, run on the outside of him towards the byline, and it ends up pulling out Steve Cook as Nketiah does make a darting run between the center backs, but luckily for Eddie Howe, Ake tracked the run well and he was able to clear the lines for a corner kick. But when you see that breakdown, you have to question Howe's setup. When they shifted to the 4-5-1, it was to ensure that they have 3v3 in midfield and that they had cover for Saka in that wide zone as he was constantly getting forward. You have Harry Wilson sticking to Saka, you have Fraser stepping out to Bellerin, and then you have Gosling who should be stepping out into the path of Xhaka if he looks to drop into those zones. If you don't do that and you have Wilson stepping into the path of Xhaka, which forces Smith into the path of Saka, then if Martinelli looks to dart into that space, it does force Gosling or Sermon to cover. More likely it would be Gosling, but that's unnecessary. Have Gosling push out to step into the path of Xhaka, you still have the midfield battle set in stone, and you don't get exploited like that. But Bournemouth got back into the game in the final 15 minutes of that first half, and it did stem through wide play. We ended up seeing Fraser take on Bellerin and Pepe to deliver across the box that was cleared upwards by Xhaka, and it fell into the path of Harry Wilson, who side volleyed an effort on goal that Martinez pushed away. Shortly after that, we also saw Sermon in a deeper position, not closed down by Willock, who dropped into the midfield 5 closer to Lewis Cook, and Sermon slid the ball out into the path of Harry Wilson, who was occupied by Saka. We had Martinelli doing a good job of tracking the run of Smith on the underlap, but Harry Wilson looked to cut in on Saka, and he clipped across into the box over Mustafi, Solanke, and Guendouzi ball watching, and Gosling made a darting run into the box, but Bellerin did a good job of coming across to ensure that he did nod his effort over the net. And then we saw Harry Wilson drop off a bit deeper towards the halfway line to receive a pass from Steve Cook across Nketiah, and he ended up playing a long diagonal ball into the path of Fraser, who was now able to go 1v1 with Bellerin as Pepe was caught out of position, but he also located Simpson's overlapping run, and he played in Simpson, who tried to play a cut back to the edge of the box, but Xhaka cleared his lines. So when we look at the second half, we're expecting a tactical improvement from Eddie Howe, looking to possibly change his system to ensure that Bournemouth could fight back into the game, but we didn't get that. From Arsenal, on the other hand, we did see Willock improve his movement, often shifting to the left of Sermon to receive the ball, and we saw that on 2 occasions when Mustafi was able to break the lines to find Willock. Unfortunately for Arsenal, that didn't lead to any groundbreaking attacking play. Nonetheless, it did ensure that they were able to bypass Bournemouth's new shape if Willock was adventurous with his movement. We didn't see Xhaka drop off into that left back zone as often as he did in that first half, and he often looked to combat in the midfield area, with Saka being very cautious with his movement. And the only change that Arsenal had to make initially in that half was holding for Mustafi, who eventually did have to leave the game due to an injury. We ended up seeing Bournemouth also trying to press a bit higher by getting their shuttlers to press the spare man that Solanke wasn't getting to. But the issue that Bournemouth did encounter when they pushed the shuttler higher on the center back was that they didn't block off the passing lane, and we didn't see Sermon look to close down the free Arsenal midfielder. Arteta eventually turned to his bench once again by bringing on Dani Ceballos for Nicolas Pepe and shifting Willock out into a right-handed zone. And what he wanted to do there was gain more control on the game and try to fizzle it out. But the introduction of Dani Ceballos forced Eddie Howe into another tactical change. He brought on Simon Francis and Callum Wilson and shifted to a 3-5-2. So he had Callum Wilson partner up with Solanke. He dropped Ryan Fraser to right wing back, and we saw Smith move to left wing back with Simon Francis shifting into a right center back role. Nonetheless, Mikel Arteta did catch Eddie Howe's tactical change, and he did shift to a 3-5-2 as well. We saw Martinelli push up a bit higher with Nketiah, and we saw Xhaka drop off into that left center back role. That meant that we did see Willock move to a right central midfield role, and we had Saka and Bellerin moving out into the wingback roles. And even with that change that Eddie Howe tried to pull off, we still saw Arsenal get the better chances in that 3-5-2, with Dani Ceballos on 2 occasions pushing forward to split Ryan Fraser and Francis to find Saka breaking in down that left channel. But on both occasions when Saka broke into that left channel, his low crosses were cleared out of the 6-yard box by Steve Cook. Besides that, there were no other developments in terms of the overall tactical battle. When you break down that game as a whole, Mikel Arteta won the tactical battle here. Willock and Xhaka's positioning was decisive. When you look at Willock, he helped Arsenal dominate the center of the pitch, whereas when he did receive the ball between the lines, he was decisive in Arsenal creating quality chances in the final third, and he played a crucial role in both goals. Whereas when you look at Xhaka, his willingness to drop off into a left center back role helped Arsenal bypass Bournemouth's pressing, and it pushed Saka forward to exploit Harry Wilson's unwillingness to track his runs. Arsenal were up 2-0 in that opening 30 minutes, and even when Eddie Howe shifted to a 4-5-1, they did create another chance to go up 3-0, and when Bournemouth did find avenues out in those wider areas, they were organized and ensured that they cut out all that danger. The second half was pretty much a dead rubber. Bournemouth's pressing was disjointed, and when they shifted to a 3-5-2, Mikel Arteta reacted responsively, and even though Bournemouth scored a late goal, Arsenal comfortably saw out the game. But let me know what you guys think. Can Arsenal win the FA Cup this season under Mikel Arteta? And if they do, would it be deemed a successful season? And what about Bournemouth? Are they in danger of possibly getting relegated under Eddie Howe? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And once again, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.